the depiction of Hannibal is interesting because for almost every serial killer that had been shown in films was kind of a Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, and here you have someone whose main weapon is perhaps their intellect or their ability to read people, and that's part of the reason why this film had such an impact, as here was a serial killer shown as being extremely intelligent, manipulative, and able to control people, and not just some crazy guy with a knife going running around and killing people.
An element of humanity, strong humanity, that I think is always important to have in when portraying serial killers or criminals in general, because they are human. Hi!
And welcome back to the 6th episode of the iMovie podcast, the podcast in which we go through each of the top 250 films on Letterboxds, not in order, and each week we watch one of these films and we bring you our thoughts, our analysis, our discussion,
and our insights.
And
fresh impressions,
whether there are some or not has been a cause of debate, but we try and be as
spontaneous and enriching as possible, I guess, and to break down the film as much as we can.
Yes.
And this week is all about Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, I'm wearing a 90s Barcelona kit, and this film is from the 90s, and it's
1991 specifically.
Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs, which I think is placed 109th out of 250.
So it's quite high rated.
It is.
It's 4.3 stars on Letterboxds.
And so, a bit of context for the very few people, I imagine, who haven't heard of Silence of the Lambs. It's based on a series of novels by Thomas Harris, and those novels are all about the character of Hannibal Lecter, who's a cannibal serial killer, as portrayed by Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs. And Silence of the Lambs isn't the first novel. I think there's another one called Red Dragon. Hannibal was directed by Ridley Scott in 2001, and Red Dragon, which is a remake of the film Manhunter from the 80s, and follows broadly the same story. It came out, I think, in either 2002 or 2003. And Manhunter, which is the first Thomas Harris Hannibal Lecter story, starring Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter, came out in 1988, so 3 years before Silence of the Lambs, but has been broadly forgotten by, I guess, by the world. I mean, it's quite famous, but it doesn't have any reputation compared to Silence of the Lambs.
Do you have any problems, Will? No. Yeah, of course you do.
Also, I think because, Silence of the Lambs has Anthony Hopkins, that became so iconic that for me it was the first time I was watching it, and in fact I thought it was much more about him, but actually the story is developed around another case. He's a helper, let's say.
Yeah, he's more of a side plot. But, and then recently, of course, this world has been expanded by the Hannibal TV show starring Mads Mikkelsen, which I've never seen. I don't think you've ever seen. But I would like to see, and people say it's quite good, so it would be interesting to see it as, I think that's probably the best reviewed Hannibal content apart from Silence of the Lambs, because the 2 sequels with Anthony Hopkins and then the 3rd sequel with Gaspard Ulliel, French actor, are meant to be pretty terrible.
Okay. Also, Mads Mikkelsen is very good in general.
He is very good.
So,
he's very
makes
good.
sense, yeah. I can see him, to be honest, playing this role.
Yeah.
So, if you've seen it, I don't know, should we? I think we should, maybe.
So, Silence of the Lambs is actually not... I mean, the main character isn't Hannibal Lecter, it's a police officer called Clarice, played by Jodie Foster. She's a student trainee at the FBI, and she's been assigned to... Well, they're trying to solve this case of a serial killer named Buffalo Bill, and to do that, she's been assigned to speak to Hannibal Lecter because the FBI higher-ups think that he might be able to give the Bureau a hand in solving of this case. and
she doesn't know that in first hand, actually.
No,
at the beginning she just thinks that she has to practice a bit with Hannibal Lecter, because also she's assigned to the department of behavioral science, if I'm not wrong, and the head is Dr. Crawford, and that's also, I think, a character that is quite important, so I would mention it. And so the story develops into this.
Yeah, and it's this eerie, I think horror film is the right word, or serial killer film. And I think it's one of the first serial killer films, I think, where the concept of the serial killer, rather than being, at least in terms of the depiction of Hannibal, the depiction of Buffalo Bill, I think, is more questionable for many reasons. But the depiction of Hannibal is interesting because for, almost every serial killer that had been shown in films was kind of a Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so a grotesque monster. And here you have, like, someone whose main weapon is perhaps their intellect or their ability to read people. And that's, I guess that was part of the reason why this film had such an impact, as here was a serial killer shown as being extremely intelligent, manipulative, and able to control people, and not just some crazy guy with a knife running around and killing people.
Yes, absolutely, it's true. Also, in a certain way, you empathize a lot with him. So he's shown also as very human, very monstrous, and very above average of the human level in terms of he's so brilliant, but at the same time very human and very interested in the human category, as we see a lot with Clarice. And so I think that's also one thing that is triggering too, because he's extremely he's not like he's monstrous, but he's not, as you were saying, like just a psycho, a random psycho.
No, he's got a human touch to him.
Yes,
you can almost feel empathy towards him in some moments.
Absolutely. Sometimes you hope that he is going to get away somehow. At least I hoped for that in a certain way. Also because he's treated as an animal.
He's got that certain extra amount of humanity, which is perhaps one of the reasons in the 90s this film made such an impact. And this film, in fact, swept up at the Oscars. I think it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, and Best...
See, but he's like a non-protagonist actor, which also, again...
No, he won Main Actor.
Anthony Hopkins, are you sure?
Yeah. Which is surprising, given he's not in the film much, but he won the Best Actor Oscars. In fact, I don't know if this has changed, but he's the actor who spent the least amount of time on screen to win the Best Actor. Because I think he's only on screen for like 19 minutes. Not 16 minutes.
Probably under 20 minutes in any case. Yeah. It's crazy. He's so iconic for this reason.
Okay, this is where my first issue with the film comes in. Because I like this film, and I think the second time I saw it, I liked it more. Because we didn't watch it together, we watched it separately.
He watched it here.
Yeah, I watched it at the Stockholm Film Festival.
And I watched it at home.
And Letty watched it at home. And I think I liked it more the second time I saw it. But I have to say that there's still... My main issue, I think, and I think this is not necessarily even the fault of the film, but I think that it's a film that's been quite influential, and therefore a lot of the ideas have been replicated in other fields, and this type of serial killer motif has been copied many times. And so I think firstly the fact that when people who are younger and who didn't see the film when it first came out have probably already seen things that have copied from the film, and therefore it loses some of its originality. And secondly, I think that I find Anthony Hopkins' performance a bit too theatrical at times, in that it doesn't always completely convince me, especially in the first scene where they meet. I never completely buy into the idea of him as a serial killer, because it's very stage acting, it's very hammed up, and he's great. I mean, so he's very good. And I think throughout the film he gets better and adds more strings to his bow. But there's always some question that is, for me, it feels like a guy acting rather than an actual killer. And so I can play 2 scenes now, and one of which will be Anthony Hopkins, and the other will be
Brian Cox.
Brian Cox from Manhunter.
Good morning.
Dr. Lecter, my name is Clarice Starling. May I speak with you?
You're one of Jack Crawford's, aren't you?
I am, yes.
May I see your credentials?
Certainly.
Did you get my card?
I got it, thank you.
And how is Officer Stewart? The one who was first to see my basement.
Stuart's fine.
Emotional problems, I hear. Do you have any problems, Will?
No.
No. Of course you don't.
And for me, I always thought that Brian Cox in Manhunter is a more terrifying villain in the fact that he feels he's got more vulnerability, he's less a superhuman, but he also feels like he actually could be a serial killer. He's more raw, he's got more edge. Whereas for me, Hopkins is a brilliant Shakespearean performance almost, but I never felt it to be quite real. Even in, I don't know, I know that it's perceived as one of the greatest performances of all time, so also expectations will be higher. And I don't know, what do you think? Because this was your first time seeing it.
It's my first time seeing it. And again, I thought that he was the main character because of the aura around him, and you can really perceive it during the film. And let's say, before watching the film, you showed me in the past this comparison between the 2 scenes, the Brian Cox, let's say the 2 acting, Brian Cox and Anthony Hopkins. And I could agree, I can see what you mean. And I agree, actually, in general. But seeing it in the film, Anthony Hopkins, I thought, I didn't feel that. I tried to in some moments, and I understand, post having watched it, I can think about it and think, oh, okay, it's true, actually there was something that was very staged, and as you said, superhuman is a bit too much. In that sense, it's not super relatable, even if he has some human elements, as we underlined just now. But he's above, too much above, maybe. And Brian Cox is not as much. He's more us, which is also important, I think, in terms of this, of understanding that these things happen in real life and they are not necessarily these out of the world people who commit these horrible crimes. It can be a normal person. And that's important, and also connects to, I think, also the theme of prisons and how do we treat people and humans in prison, and we see it also in this mise-en-scène. But I think he's theatrical, yes, but it still fits the character.
No, yeah, I think it's very good, and there's many scenes with him that I really like. His escape scene.
He told me there is one scene that will absolutely stick with you, and then
because I think that scene is really marking, kind of sticks in your mind, and even his final lines in the film, I think, which have gone down. I mean, basically all of his scenes have somehow become legendary or have become so quotable that, the improvised noise he makes, which we will put the clip here.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
And then
yes, because also he's improvising, and the whole set somehow, and all the actors involved in that case. Okay, it's only him and Clarice or Jodie Foster, but okay, they are more spontaneous, and she has the fear somehow and she can react immediately. That's also part of his greatness, I guess.
Yeah, although again, for me, that's one of the moments that leaves me a bit cold in some sense.
I think that.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's too much. It's too over the top.
Yeah.
It's almost like something from not a cartoon, but it's so far detached from, because some of the film has got like this gritty, realistic feel, especially the stuff with Buffalo Bill and kind of the kidnappings, and it's a bit dark, and it's like, oh, actually quite serious stuff. And then these kind of superhuman touches where he's able to manipulate people just by speaking and stuff feels like it's from a different register. And I think that's maybe one of the things that, it's not that I think this is a bad film. I think it's very well made in its job, but I just think it doesn't convince me, and it always leaves me. It doesn't have the effect on me that it's probably trying to have. With some exceptions, he has some great moments, but
Yes.
I think.
And maybe also because he doesn't have too many scenes or too many lines, and therefore those moments that he has becoming even more iconic, and we can remember them more, or they stay with us a bit more. But yes, no, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's two different. It's also, I think, it's two different stories. Somehow the movie can be divided into two. The first part is Hannibal Lecter and his way to be a cannibal or a multi-serious crime serial killer, criminal, I want to say. And the second part, which is Buffalo Bill and his way to be a criminal and his techniques. Two different types of minds behind horrible scenarios, horrible crimes. So that's also maybe interesting. But the unifying thread in the end is Jodie Foster.
I think for me, Jodie Foster is actually the most interesting and important part of the film, because I think for me, the single most interesting thing the film does is question many ways in which the police works, and question many ways in which how a woman can feel comfortable within the police and how a woman can exist within a man's world. I think it's a rare film showing where the police's perspective is the principal one, that also has criticism of the functioning of the police and shows the police to make characters uncomfortable, specifically with Jodie Foster's character, who throughout the film is shown to be alone, at odds, mocked, humiliated, flirted with when she doesn't want to be flirted with. She puts up with all this behaviour, and most of it comes from her supposed colleagues, whether it's people flirting with her, people who don't want to include her, people who won't give her credit, and it's a real fight throughout the film for her to get the credit she deserves and to be able to work on the case, let alone deal with the serial killers. But the first struggle is to be able to exist as a woman, as part of the FBI, and I think that's really well shown, actually, in the film.
What do you do when you're not detecting agents, darling?
Try to be a student, Dr. Pilcher.
You ever go out for cheeseburgers and beer? The amusing house wine?
Are you hitting on me, Doctor?
Yes.
Gotcha.
What do you got, Rodden?
Agent Starling, meet Mr. Acherontius Styx.
I agree. I think her character brings with her all these themes throughout the whole film, and sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's also talked about. For example, as you were saying, yes, in the police you see, in the FBI, you see a lot of these misogynist behaviors, but also at some point you see that Mr. Crawford, the doctor, the director,
Jack Crawford, the boss, right?
The boss, her boss, he at some point asks her, "Oh, you really gotta be annoyed by how I talk to the guy," referring to the scene when he asks, he says this guy, "Oh, let's not talk about these things," meaning women being destroyed in front of certain people, meaning Jodie Foster, so Clarice. And she got pissed off so much, and I understand, because okay, what the hell? I'm here, I'm working on these things that I've seen corpses of women being completely destroyed in every moment, And then I think also is one of the most powerful things of this film. In every moment, the spectator is with her, and somehow the spectator feels the male gaze on them, because we are Jodie Foster, and we feel also at the same time her uneasiness of seeing all these people, women, completely destroyed, and she all the time thinks I could be them. And at the same time, she has to be super strong and go beyond this, like, totalizing fear and uncomfort that comes also by the fact that she's always surrounded by this man, always. And also, as you said before, they question her authority, and at some point she has a scene where she has to say to all these FBI men and policemen, even in general, she has to speak and say, okay, now you can leave the room. And you can see every character that is a bit doubting it. Some are going immediately, some are waiting, some are like looking at her like, oh, you really think you can give me orders? But she was supported by her boss that was in the same room. And so I think for this reason, mainly, they said, okay, she has this kind of authority, or we can't really question his authority, and therefore we're going away. And all these little details portrayed all the time keep remind the spectator how is the power dynamic and how is unbalanced. Because not only she's woman, she's also younger and a student. So these things are super, opposing each other and give like different perspectives. So I think that's very interesting.
And I think there's a number of themes that have basically that effect, as you say, where you feel this unspoken discomfort or tension because of her place as a woman in this situation. For example, the scene in the elevator at the very beginning where she's made to stand out through the colour motif, and because she's surrounded by these men and she's the only woman there. The scene where she's jogging in the training flashback and her only female colleague are being observed by all the male agents running the other direction. And it's all very visual stuff, mostly unspoken.
Also, in this one, we also posted on both the shorts of YouTube and on Instagram, so it's more clear. I think we can even post it in this video now. But in any case, also, we highlighted it in the past days, so in case you want to check it out.
Yeah. And but I think especially, as you say, where we're put into her eyes, which, for example, in the first scene where she enters the prison and she has to walk along the corridor past the inmates leading up to Hannibal Lecter, that scene, I think, is where we're really put into her eyes, because it's a very uncomfortable walk in which she's being observed by everyone. That's a horrible situation to be in. You really don't want to be in it. And because the camera is sort of taking... It's from her point of view, so we are her. Yeah. We have to live that situation for the duration of that scene, which I think is, again, absolutely done on purpose. And I think that's the most interesting part of the film in the end, really.
And also because at the same time, she's not shown as she's stupid or unaware. She knows exactly what she's going through, what she will go through. And we are just confirmed, because she was already a bit like trying to be very strong and at the same time aware that some of how she would have been seen. Also with Hannibal Lecter.
Well, I think...
And so she has a bit of fear even before, also because, okay, of course you're going to meet like Hannibal, like a super serial killer, so it makes sense. But at the same time, I think, like, I don't know, I felt like really she did a great job, because we are with her, we feel every uncomfortable feeling that she's going through, and that's a great job, really.
And I think there's a possible interpretation of this film where you see her relationship with Hannibal Lecter as almost therapeutic in a way, because he's the only character in the film who doesn't perceive her as beneath him because he himself is in this horrible situation of being locked away, and she's his only human contact, and therefore he has to forge a relationship with her which he doesn't want to forge with the director of the prison because he's horrible, and he doesn't want to forge with these other characters. But with her, he's able to, she's almost got a bit of empathy for him, where the other characters don't, and therefore they forge. I mean, not a friendship by any means, but they do forge a relationship. And I always think maybe you can interpret it as the other way too, as for her, talking to him is almost an escape from this world of being seen a specific way. And I don't know if that's because also he absolutely treats her horribly in some ways. And she even calls him out. There's one scene where he asks her some sexual questions and she says, well, frankly, I don't
even feel like, yes.
I don't want to answer these questions. This is what Miggs would say, etc.
Do you think Jack Crawford wants you sexually? True, he is much older, but do you think he visualizes scenarios, exchanges, fucking you?
That doesn't interest me, Doctor. Frankly, it's the sort of thing that Miggs would say.
Not anymore.
But also, even here, and I think especially in the first part where they have these encounters, Clarice and Hannibal, he shows respect towards her, but only because of certain, certain codes of courtesy. Then he starts to think that she's actually intelligent and she has something that he's interested in terms of also on a human level. So he has a view and he can imagine, he can work, his mind can work because his mind never stops. But also because she's brilliant and he likes that. He likes also, I think, to be the instructor and the guide of a brilliant mind or potentially brilliant mind. He likes this role of the professor. He's like this role of being the expert towards the lamb in this case. And she's to be forged, to be shaped. And she's young, a student, and I'll be your master.
How very thoughtful. Or did Jack Crawford send you for one last wheedle before you're both booted off the case?
No, I came because I wanted to.
People will say we're in love.
He likes this. This recognition, this role of being superior also, because he really believes he's superior, and he has some elements, as you said. Let's say the sexism in this film is very interesting.
So I think another thing we should talk about is firstly the style of the film, which is very dark. I mean, aesthetically, I think there's a lot of the lighting is extremely dim, especially in the prison, which you feel like you're almost surrounded by darkness. There's one scene where Hannibal is hollow, like his cell is almost impossibly dark, and Clarice is kind of sitting outside, and you can hardly even see him. He's just like an outline, and
theatrical again.
The mood matches the lighting in this case because it's an extremely dark film. There's really very few moments of relief from the constant tension that's taking place, and it has this kind of 90s music, which I always think is a shame because I think the music could be a lot better in this film, and I think that's always the fact that this film doesn't have an iconic soundtrack.
Interesting.
For me, it just feels like very like it could be from Columbo or something. The music, it's just too. I don't know. It's for me. I put it in the same boat as Terminator, which is another film for me that when I watched, I was surprised by how disappointing the soundtrack was, and especially for films like these two that have gone down in legendary terms, to have that type of soundtrack, which feels very classical and very unoriginal, I think is a bit of a shame, especially because there's real potential to have in some scenes a really great soundtrack, which sadly I don't think is necessarily the case.
But then even more interesting that it works a lot even without a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because it really works.
Yeah, I think it's very. I mean, yeah, it's very well written.
Yeah.
So.
And going back to the colors, it's true because also I think like Hannibal Lecter, he's always in this aseptic environment. Does this word exist? He's always in this very cold environment, and then the first time that he kills is actually in a very luminous environment. And as soon as he finishes to kill, that really stuck with me a bit. You can see, besides the blood, you can see also on the floor there are different elements of red. So after all this dark that we've been through with his character specifically, then we have this immersion into the red color, and I thought that's interesting. I liked it. It stayed with me. It had an impact. It's visible, the difference, and it's also a bit like he came back to life.
Jimmy, watch it! He's got it!
Terrible. But yeah. And yes, so this is very interesting. And then in the last part, when we have Billy, Buffalo Bill, and then we have the yellow color as predominant.
Yeah, it's kind of this deep south. It feels a bit dirty, grimy, rural. And
sick.
It's sick. Yeah, sick is a good word.
It's the vomit in a certain way. That color.
Yeah, it feels nice. But I think there's so there's that whole section with Buffalo Bill and the way in which his psychology is broken down by the film, I think, hasn't aged particularly well. As in, firstly, because it feels a lot of the time as if the plot, people are just assuming things for plot reasons, and there's a few holes in the plot where people kind of miraculously guess things without any real evidence, it feels like. Mm. And secondly, because of the way in which, I guess, transness or queerness, even though it's stated that he's not trans, because he's not, I mean, let's say the way in which transness is spoken about in this film is not just of its time, but badly made. There's no real effort to explore that at all, I think. It's just, this is a villain, he's queer, that's all you need to know. He's strange, therefore he's queer, therefore we don't really care what he is, but he's kind of a creepy villain. That, I think, is a real shame.
Yes, because also somehow they say, yes, actually, this just comes from trauma that he had in the past. So somehow it's also confirming the idea that, if you're trans... There are two lines, I think, because in a certain way they're saying, if you're transsexual, transgender, then it means that you had some traumas in the past. But at the same time, they're saying, but he's not actually transgender. The way he presents himself is actually not what his soul corresponds to, in terms of he's actually not a woman. He just plays with it because he went nuts. I think like there are these two lines. So, I don't know, but the fact is, again, we just know from the point of view of viewers, the watchers, and so on, people who, just are interested in him, in them, as a psycho killer, a serial killer.
Yeah, but I think even the scenes you spend alone with him there's not much effort. He's presented as either absurd, insane, or without any depth or real complexity. And for example, all this effort that's made to turn Hannibal Lecter into more, I wouldn't say three-dimensional because he's very one-dimensional, but to turn him into a more thought-out character and to turn Clarice's situation into a more complex and thought-out one is not shown at all in the case of Buffalo Bill. And that's why probably no one really remembers Buffalo Bill from this film. And if you haven't seen the film, you might not even know who he is, because it doesn't really stick with you because it's comparatively much less interesting, I guess, compared to Hannibal Lecter. And
Oh my God, please.
It places the lotion in the basket.
it feels like they knew that when they made the film, because it's the main story, but it's kind of pushed to the side for most of it, and then towards the end it kind of gets resolved quickly enough.
It's true, because also, for example, all the elements of real tension are not really within. Some at the end, yes, yeah. Exactly. But let's say, for example, the most tense I've been, I think it was when the director of the prison forgot the pen in the cell with Hannibal Lecter. That was crazy. I felt like, what is going to happen and last so long, and also I feel like the camera showed the pen so many times and for so long, so it was like, okay, that's to stay with you. Remember.
Again, like, not to hammer this film because I think it's well made, but again, that scene is like makes it very obvious that something's going to happen with the pen, because it kind of keeps focusing on it, and then he's like, "Oh, where's my pen gone?" You know, just afterwards, and it's like, okay, well, I wonder what's going to happen. I don't know. There's some moments where either because of the way in which things have changed in terms of thriller tropes since this film, or because this film was influential, again, it loses some of that effect that it once had, probably.
And for me also, for example, in this sense, the same thing was with the scene towards the end when she rings the bell at his door, and we think that is the FBI, and so that play, the game, works about, okay, if you, in 2025, you know what is going to happen, probably you can assume that it's actually they're in the wrong place. Probably in the 90s that was
even in the 90s maybe, because imagine that she'll face the villain and it won't be the FBI that faces the villain.
That's absolutely true. It's true. But this game probably was less.
Yes.
Had been less used, so it was more intriguing. Probably that was even more effective than it could be now.
Yeah. I agree.
Even if in general, it works, I think it's very effective.
The film has some moments of extreme tension and some moments where you think, oh, that's quite clever, that's well done.
Oh, yes.
But it also has moments, I think, where if you've seen a lot of films, or if you've seen especially a lot of thriller films or serial killer films, you'll think, oh, I've seen that before. Probably because, that's, again, it's hard to hold that against a film, but it just happens to be that if you watch this for the first time now, so many things you'll have seen in other films.
Yes, it's true. But also maybe because it has become very iconic, and you use some of these tropes, games, techniques. There is one big theme that I also would like to highlight, which is, I think, as I mentioned it before, the prison as a place where the authority takes this role and this permission. It self-claims this permission to abuse the prisoners. It's not super, it is explicit, but it's not super highlighted as a theme, but it is there because the director of this prison, who is portrayed as a total prick, he's abusing of his power a lot, and you can see how he's torturing, especially Hannibal Lecter, with no reason, just because he can do it. And you see it already from how he addresses to Clarice at the beginning when they met the first time.
We get a lot of detectives here, but I must say I can't ever remember one as attractive.
Yes, he really he abuses of his power, and that's a topic that I think is well made in terms of thanks to the fact that we empathize with Hannibal Lecter in some moments. We can feel the uncomfort and the injustice in the way he's treated, even if he has done horrible things and he keeps doing horrible things. But since we manage to see somehow the human sides of him, we understand that some behavior they can't be accepted.
And that last scene where he says, I'm going to have an old friend for dinner. You kind of end up rooting for him because the guy is that side. But that's
I was a bit I don't know if I should feel guilty, but I hope he will find him and.
No, of course.
I mean, he's very caricatural, this director. Even if actually people like that exist so much. I mean, I think like in the first interaction with Clarice, I think that's extremely relatable, unfortunately. Is he actually so exaggerated?
It was a period where sexism in the workplace, let's say, was probably much more explicit than it could even be today. Another thing that lets you notice that I didn't notice when watching the film.
Because I could go back, so it's easy to check. But yes, basically going back to Buffalo Bill, there was when he starts to go crazy because of the dog, and also that I think is an interesting theme. He's like trying to look for solutions, and he looks. There is a scene when he goes towards his bed, and we can see the blanket with a few swastikas drawn. And I thought, what? Huh? And so I thought, interesting. And then after, like a couple of scenes after, when Jodie Foster is in his house, we can see, and they interact, we can see at some moment a shot of a poster where also is like, there is a swastika portrayed. I thought interesting that they had also this element of Nazism and I don't know, I guess like white supremacy. I don't know now, because the fact is we don't know too much about the character. These are like little inputs that we receive.
Although it's entirely plausible that a serial killer type would be attracted to the world of.
And if I'm not wrong, there are also like a couple of US flags. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's like, you know, a big patriotism and going towards a certain way. So they wanted to add this element.
But it's not necessarily explored much, but I think it's interesting to note that element also exists.
Yeah, because his political ideas are really not there. As again, we don't know the character.
No, but I mean, his hatred of women is shown, so maybe that's something at least.
Yeah, but more the fact that he sees other women as objects, and at the same time, though he's fascinated, he wants to be them. So I don't know, it's this intricate mentality, desiring and repulsing, and I can't be them, so I can kill them to become them, but then I can't. And all these things of the butterflies.
Yeah, the transformation. The transformation motif. But so I think in total, I think you liked this film more than I did.
I did.
But yeah, I think for me it's a good film. Not one that I would rank amongst my favourites or the most effective, even the most effective horror films I've seen. But you know, you can see some aspects that absolutely, you know, stand out. Although I think I definitely wouldn't place it amongst the top 250 probably. But I know it's a very iconic film, so you have to take. I mean, it's gained a lot of recognition, so it's really, and some moments have gone down again as mythical and legendary, and so for that reason, it's important. Let's say it has culturally, it's had a big impact. You know, it's been parodied in so many different shows and films and copied, and even the mask that he wears so he can't bite people has been copied and made fun of in so many different films and TV shows and stuff.
It's true. It's true. I remember I was a bit like, even if I've never watched it, I was a bit horrified. Also because in my mind, since the title is Silence of the Lambs, I thought lambs as children. So I thought he was cannibalist towards children. So for me, that was even more. So I was a bit relieved that it wasn't towards children, at least that we saw. So that was a bit of a. But yes, I agree. No, for me, it stuck with me a bit more, I guess. Like, of course, like it's a fresh watch, but still, it's. I'm glad to have finally watched this. I also wouldn't put it among the 250. Yes, not so high rated. I think some films maybe deserve to be higher than this one. And some, especially that are not included, I would include higher than this one.
But I think it's more, it depends. If it's 250 most iconic or marking films of all time, or the most influential, then it clearly is.
Maybe it should also be higher than
the
100.
Best, then I don't think. That's just my opinion. Oh yeah, and I think also it's interesting that the sequels to this film that came out, and I think Jodie Foster isn't in them, but her character, she's been recast by Julianne Moore, I think.
Oh,
and then
Anthony
Hopkins is still in them, but I think they were so badly received comparatively that they've almost been forgotten by the collective film watching. Not forgotten, but they're certainly. And I think if you asked a lot of people, does Silence of the Lambs have a sequel? Most people might not even be aware of the 2 sequels that came out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that those films have been. Because it does kind of set up for a sequel at the end. There is a bit of an open ending.
Yes, exactly. In fact, I asked him, is there a second that I didn't know about?
Yeah.
Yes, true. Yeah, because in the end, also somehow, even if you can imagine, you want to know what.
It's pretty bad, the sequel, I have to say. It really makes Silence of the Lambs look better by comparison, because it's kind of like, I wish we were still in that world where there was still like threat and tension compared to the kind of pure silliness of the sequel.
On a related subject, I must confess to you, I'm giving very serious thought to eating your wife.
See, but also because I guess if Jodie Foster is not there, I think one of the most interesting things was the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice.
Yeah, and the Clarice character's still there, I think. But
but that was iconic. It was iconic because it was them. And Jodie Foster made a super great job, so to remove that element can change a lot of things. And the last thing that I wanted to say is also, because before I mentioned the dog and the topic of the dog for Buffalo Bill, again, an element of humanity, strong humanity, that I think is always important to have in when portraying serial killers or criminals in general, because they are human. And that is also reinforced, I think, by the fact that the mom of the student who has been, taken, the next victim that ends up not being a victim, the fact that she's describing her daughter as human, and Jodie Foster comments on this as a voiceover, comments on these things as she's doing a great job, because she's reminding him that his victim is not an object, but she is a person. And I think this element gets
to an extent, although again I'm not sure how convinced I am by the psychology behind that. But
in the end it doesn't work. And also we know that he knew her, he's followed her before, so he already could see her somehow as a subject and not only an object. But at the same time, yes, this is, I think, reinforced by the dog and the extreme humanity and attachment that he shows towards this little dog that he doesn't show towards his victim, even if that's making him question a bit.
I think there's that contrast shown between the sophistication of Lecter and the barbarity of Buffalo Bill, which is always put into, which is really, because they're both killers at the end of the day, but they're both portrayed as almost opposites in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
As in Buffalo Bill almost becomes the animal, barely capable of interacting as the human, and whereas Hannibal Lecter is almost above the human, he almost becomes superhuman in the way that the film portrays him.
That's true, that's an interesting point, I agree. He becomes superhuman, more than human. And Buffalo Bill is a little child, not able to manage his feelings and emotions, and needing to, spoil himself. So, well, that was it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you, developed some thoughts that you can write down in the comments if you agree or disagree.
Yes.
Or even especially if you notice something, some elements that we didn't notice or we didn't even mention in general. And we don't know. Again, we don't know which the next episode will be. Surprise! Maybe it will be before sunset, since we watched Before Sunrise, and maybe you need the second part. Or maybe it will be something else. We don't know yet. But in any case, we will see in the next episode. Thank you for arriving here.
Yeah, Brian Cox is the true Hannibal Lecter.
That's his take. We might agree, we might not. I don't know. I still have to watch that film. If you watched it, please give us your opinion. Let us know. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye.